Dr. Melissa Batchelor is the host of the podcast, This is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. She is an experienced nurse and nurse practitioner with many acronyms behind her name. We met at the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship during an Idea Test Lab demo day, where Melissa was a judge and a former winner of the Spring 2024 awards. I am honored to have Melissa on because many partners of commercial fishermen solo parent for days, weeks, or up to 6 months at a time, maybe longer depending on the fishery. And we have several in our community who are also caring for aging parents. Let's learn the tools of how we can care for ourselves while caring for our loved ones. Let's dive in. I'm Megan Waldrop, host of the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast, an extension of an online community for partners to connect and feel less alone. Our podcast invites fishermen, family, friends, and supporters of the industry to learn, laugh, vent, and hear stories about this incredibly unique way of life. What do you say? Let's dive in. So Dr. Melissa Batchelor, thank you so much again for your time, for being with the Partners of Commercial Fishermen community. It really is an honor to have you on the show today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yay, awesome. So I wanted to start at the beginning. How did you get into nursing and becoming a nurse practitioner, and what made you lean towards your specific niche, which is to help those with Alzheimer's along with their families and caretakers?
Well, this is actually a funny story. I had no intentions of being a nurse. Like growing up, I wasn't one of those kids. It was like, oh, I can't wait to be a nurse. I was filling out my college application and it said major. And I thought, I probably shouldn't put supermodel down there. So I asked my dad what I should do. He's like, put down nursing. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I think you'd be good at it. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I put that down because I wanted to go to Charlotte, which was the biggest city. So I figured, I could get to my supermodel venue while going to taking prereqs for nursing school. But kind of started the coursework. The modeling is actually what taught me that I love to eat, because you are not really allowed to eat, So now, so when the modeling career did not work out, I came back to Wilmington, got into nursing school, and knew that I didn't really want to be a nurse, but I did want to be a nurse practitioner. And then when I graduated, I got a job in a local nursing home, skilled nursing home. And when I went back to graduate school to become a nurse practitioner, I thought, well, here's my chance to get out of geriatrics. I'll become a family nurse practitioner. But when I was in class, the only time I would get fired up is if we were talking about older adults, and nobody else understood Medicare or Medicaid, like none of the stuff that I already understood just because of where I had worked. So I've actually never worked in a hospital, but graduated from graduate school and went back into working with a geriatrician and all the nursing homes and assisted living facilities around Wilmington. And then went back to get my PhD. And the PhD has actually allowed me to kind of pull all these experiences together. My research focus is on helping older adults with Alzheimer's disease to eat more food by teaching caregivers to use different hand feeding techniques. So when I was trying to decide on my research focus, I was like, well, I love to eat. I think people with Alzheimer's disease are super fun to take care of, because as a caregiver, I know them for who they are in the present moment. So it would be harder for families, but I could talk to them and say, I know this is really difficult because you know who this person was, but if you can learn to appreciate who this person is in this moment, you can still have some really great conversations and really have some meaningful interactions and still have a relationship with them. It's just different and it's changed. And so found out, through all of that I was pretty good at talking to families and helping them through those things. And so that's kind of, blending the Alzheimer's care with the love of eating, with the nursing care. But through all of that, I've had this interest in social media and health policy. And so that's why I'm doing the podcast now called This is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World, because we have a workforce of like 5.2 million physicians and nurses in this country, and less than 1% are board certified in geriatrics. It's just not a career path that, I don't have that many, well, I've never really had a student run into my classroom and be like, I can't wait to work in a nursing home and I can't wait to work with older adults. No. But, I say to them, well, doesn't matter where you work, by default, you're going to be a geriatric, you're going to need to have gerontological nursing skills because, 60% of people in hospital beds are over the age of 65, more than that in home health and skilled nursing facilities. And they'll say, well, but I'm going to work in mother baby. I'm like, perfect. Who do you think is going to come visit the mom after delivery? Probably the grandparents. They're going to want to hold the grandchild. If they have a functional or a cognitive impairment, how are you going to make sure the emotional needs of the grandparent and the mother and the baby are all met? Oh, wait, you're going to need some gerontological nursing skills. So that's
Wow.
a long, convoluted story, but that's how I ended up here. So
Oh man, that just got me so emotional. Bear with me. I love to share my emotions on this podcast because that's what this community is all about, is us to feel the feels. So I'm just going to be raw and with you, but it's so profound yet so simple and so Buddhist and all the other spiritual teachings of being in the moment with that person. I mean, that is what I try to do recently, just even with family, or friends, or even people who trigger you and you're just like, you have this history with people and you're like, how do I move past that to even just enjoy my life? And it really is to be in the moment. And that just hit me so hard. And it also brought me back to my grandmother was in a nursing home for years, and I just dreaded so much I would go see her religiously. And it's like, I want to soak in this time with my grandmother. But as soon as I'd get on that road to get to the nursing home, it just, that weight just felt so heavy on me because it was just so sad. But then at the same time, you're like, we're all going to die one day because that's the human experience. But for some reason, because people are in the geriatric stage, it feels more imminent, even though it can happen to any of us at any time, of our lives. Like we don't have to be old enough to be there. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. That just hit my heart so much. And it's nice to hear you say it in such a simple way, because like you were saying, because you are a trained professional and nurse practitioner, you're able to have those unique moments with the geriatric patients. And that just blows my mind because that's exactly what it is. I remember my grandmother would have music therapy and the therapist would come in. They were so nice and friendly. And I'm like, wow, this is these angel people coming in to help. So thank you for all you do, basically.
well, it's interesting because I feel that way about nurses that work with children. Like I have 3 kids and I like those 3, but I couldn't work in pediatrics. But I think, the feelings of being sad when you're going to visit somebody, I think that's an opportunity to flip that around to say, I'm going to get to have this day with this person because soon you won't, and then how do you make the most of that? And I think it's an interesting environment to be in. It does make a lot of people sad, but I'm like, but they're still people and they have the best stories. Like if you just sit down and talk to one of these people, you'd be like, I want to come back here every day and talk to all of them because, even repetitive behaviors in Alzheimer's disease. We had this one guy, his name was Walter, and he would like roll down the halls and he would just be screaming, I'm a bad man, I'm a bad man, bad man. And I'm like, okay, what's up with Walter? They're like, yeah, he used to be a preacher. And I'm like, what? Oh my God. Like, and that's what he's stuck on. But he'd been in knife fights. So I don't know, maybe like he had a really rough. So you begin to imagine like who these people were. He couldn't really tell me all of the stories, but then there were other people who were just physically frail. Like I got to hang out with this other lady. She was one of the first nurses in Wilmington. And she knew Dr. Sinclair. Like she trained with him. Like he helped pay for her training to become the first certified pediatric nurse in New Hanover County. And like we were over at the hospital the other day, my son and I, and there's like a little display, and it's like, it's all about Dr. Sinclair and the Children's Hospital used to be here. So it's just, but when she told me the story about getting on the train and going to Philadelphia to do that training. And it always interested me. I said, why is that the story she's choosing to tell me? She's 103. But the first time I meet her, she's telling me about how she was a nurse. She went to Philadelphia all by herself. She paid Dr. Sinclair back all the money for the training, blah, blah. And I thought, okay, wait a minute. At that point in time, I was like, this was like in the 1890s, like 1900 when she did this. So women weren't allowed to be on trains by themselves. So it just spoke, so women couldn't even shut their ankles. Like, so when you begin to put, so that's the beauty of having, to understand history and who people are and how things were at that point of time, and then how lucky you are to live in this time frame for better or for worse, you know. So to me, that's why I've always loved geriatrics. It's their stories, it's getting to know them as people, and then being able to help families who may be emotionally struggling. And some of the stuff isn't even that different. Like I remember these two daughters that when they would come in to visit their mom with Alzheimer's, they would get ready to leave, and the mom would start saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. Take me home. Take me home. And, we would intervene and kind of go in and talk with the resident and be like, hey, we are so far behind. Could you help us like fold these linens? She's like, okay. So she'd be sitting there like happily folding the linens, but the daughters are still out in the hallways, like emotionally wrecked because of the guilt. And I'm like, okay, listen, I know that this is really hard to leave her here. I said, but I'm going to just tell you how I see some similarities in my life and your life. I said, I have to drop my daughter off or my kids off at daycare. And they want to hug your knees and they don't want you to go. And they're like, please don't leave me here. I said, and then I have to but I have to because I have to go to work. And then I'm like, 5 minutes later, the preschool teachers tell me that those kids are just fine. And I'll even hang out for a couple of minutes and go back in and look, and they're totally fine. I said, 5 minutes after you leave, your mother is fine. And they were like, that helped us like so much to be like, it's going to be hard in that moment, but just realize 5 minutes after you're gone, that's one of the blessings of Alzheimer's is that they're not really going to remember.
Wow.
They're going to be happy to see you and they're going to want to go home with you, but there's a way to kind of distract them and get them focused on something else. And then they're not thinking about it anymore. So you can be okay with it too.
Wow, because that's so amazing. I mean, just our unique experiences and the fact that their contentment is different and their memory is different. And so finding that, I guess it is that struggle is mainly the ones. I mean, I remember my grandmother, she was just like, I guess, God doesn't have room in heaven for me yet. She's 97, I long life. And she's just like, I'm ready to go. She said she was ready to go for years. So it was also that kind of, okay, there's peace there, but then my feelings of feeling guilty that I was going, I was feeling dread, but also the feelings of like, I have my grandmother still. And like, it's just so nice to hear from you. Like, yeah, it is similar to like dropping your kids off, which actually I want to jump around to some of these questions about the similarities, because so as a backstory, many partners of commercial fishermen, they solo parent for days, weeks, months at a time, up to 6 months plus, depending on the fishery. Some of them also in our community are also caring for aging parents, whether it's their in-laws or their own parents. Some are doing it, raising kids and doing it at the same time, or one or the other. So I was wondering, and you kind of touched on this just now, but what are the similarities to between working with young kids and people with Alzheimer's? And I guess you kind of touched on that, but what would you say the similarities are and what are the differences?
Well, I think the similarities are being a caregiver is hard. And we can use the term parent and caregiver interchangeably. I mean, I've raised 3 kids mostly by myself. So that is a stressful thing to have to do. But it also is kind of one of those things like I never thought of it as stressful. I was just like, okay, I got a lot of crap to do. Who can I get to help me? Like, none of us can really do anything all by ourselves. And so one of the things that you had mentioned in the questions was about building a care team. Mm-hmm. So as a parent, we have a lot of other people that we can see that are in that situation the same. We go to school, we see other parents, we go to sporting events for the kids, and we're talking to each other. So there's a little bit more support and you can see other people dealing with that. Versus if you're caring for an aging parent, you're in more of a caregiver role because you're not that person's parent, I think that there's a lot of shifts in the role. Well, the one thing about when you're taking care of your kid, there's a very clear power dynamic. I'm the parent, you're the child. Versus when you're caring for an aging parent, you're having to navigate that change in power while promoting that person's autonomy. And it's harder to see other people that could support you. So you do feel like you're more alone with that. But the task and the work itself is pretty much the same. We have to, cook the meals. And then it becomes a little, if you have if you have 3 or 4 generations living under one roof, and you're trying to meet like, okay, well, this is like for my mom, she was taking care of my grandmother. Grandma Trudy didn't have any teeth. Just grew up in the South, poor woman, didn't have insurance and has no teeth. So my mom was like, well, we can't eat this if you guys come over for dinner tonight, we can't eat, Grandma Trudy's here, so we're gonna have to have like softer foods. And I'm like, Mom, that's totally fine, like. So I would talk to her about how do we even make a meal that's going to be good for the kids and the parents and the grandparents and then the great grandmother, or if someone has a swallowing problem, if they have diabetes. So there's actually ways that you can cook that are just good for everybody. But I think those are, but you have to get transportation. But I think when you're taking care of kids, it's easier to find and identify the resources to help you. And what I have found is that people aren't aware of how many resources are out there that can help you with an aging parent, and that, home and community-based services, and the chances that somebody's going to qualify to go to a nursing home, because that's what people say. They're like, well, I always told them I'd never put them in a nursing home. It's like, you probably won't qualify. Like, nursing homes of today are like the assisted livings of 30 years ago. Like, you actually have to be pretty sick. Nursing homes now are basically like step down units from hospitals. So I think it's understanding long term. So there's a lot more unknown towards the end of life. Like, what is hospice? What is palliative care? What are all the housing options? How do we get this person to their appointment? How do I even interact with their providers? How do I keep up with all their stuff? And there are ways to do that, but there's not. I'm creating a course to help people learn how to do this, but it's not like we have parenting classes. Like, there should be like caring for aging parent classes, So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, is to help people fill those pieces of the gaps in, because we get a lot of support when we have kids. We have, friends kind of built in, places that we go, that we see people, and it's a little bit more isolating and more difficult to find your tribe and your care team as you get when you're caring for an aging parent.
That's so good. And just as a side note, I'll mention this again, but Melissa's website is so full of incredible resources. I was combing through it. So all your podcast episodes are up there, your courses. It's really great. It's Melissa B, the letter B, PhD.com. And I'll put that in the show notes and we'll mention it later, but it's just amazing website. I learned so much just by combing through. I was like, wow, I didn't know this. And also I wanted to ask, because I learned about what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? I saw that was another podcast or resource that you had on there, and I'd love for you to explain to us. Well, I guess, yeah, let's start there. What's the differences between Alzheimer's and dementia?
Yeah. So dementia itself is this broad umbrella term. So if you think about the top of the umbrella, like, it's everything. And then there are like 60 to 70, or even maybe up to 100 now, different types of cognitive impairment that fall under that umbrella. Alzheimer's disease is the most common. It happens in about 60% of cases. The other 4 most common ones are like vascular dementia, frontal temporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, and like Parkinson's related dementia. So that's the difference. The terms can be used interchangeably, but it's more accurate to say the person has a dementia, unless you know, because you can also have mixed. If you don't know the type of dementia, you can just say, dementia, versus if someone's been told that they have Alzheimer's. And there's a couple of different ways to get to that level, to the specific type of cognitive impairment that you have. But that's the difference.
Got it. And then what are some misconceptions about Alzheimer's and dementia?
Well, first of all, I think that when people are concerned about their memory, they tend to avoid going to have it evaluated because they think, well, it probably is that, and then, I'm going to die the next day. It's like, no, first of all, it doesn't happen that way. You could have something that's reversible. Maybe you have a B12 deficiency, or your thyroid is not functioning properly. There's a lot of things that look like dementia, but are not. I mean, you could be anemic. There's a ton of stuff that impacts your brain as you get. You could be constipated, and it could look like you're demented.
Wow.
I'm like, wow. Like, so it really, our brains are very sensitive. So we always have to, so dementia is a diagnosis of exclusion. So if you're experiencing cognitive changes, don't be afraid to go to the doctor. It's not like you're going to go to the doctor one visit and they're going to go, yep, you've got it. Just like, no, there should be a long series of tests. It should take a year or two to get to that diagnosis because we have to see what happens over time. So I think that's one misconception, is that to avoid or deny that you're having symptoms and not go get checked out. Go ahead and go get checked out. And then I think the other thing is people think, well, if I am diagnosed with it, next week I'm going to be bedridden. It's like, no, you may not ever get to that point. 95% of people that have Alzheimer's disease live at home. They're cared for by family and friends. And you will either die with the disease or you'll die from it. So it just depends on how many other chronic illnesses you have. Like, you could die of a stroke. Your dementia won't matter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's better off to know what you're dealing with. So I think those are just a couple of the big ones. Is that it's not necessarily something to be afraid of, because it actually can put you in the driver's seat to get things in order for your family. And then you don't know the trajectory is so different for everybody. I mean, you could live another 20 years. So at least if you knew, you might rearrange your schedule and be like, let's do some of this bucket stuff now rather than waiting. It would give you time to learn about long-term care and kind of some of the potential paths that your life could take. But at the end of the day, it really is one of those situations where you need to live in the present moment, because there's no way to predict what's going to happen. You could die in a car accident. Although car accidents sometimes can be one of the first signs that people are having trouble remembering. So just be aware of that. If you have somebody who's getting in fender benders and wrecks, we might want to go get them checked for sure.
Oh, okay. So what does it mean to get checked? Like, how do you get tested? What does it look like? Are they blood tests? Are they urine samples? How does this go
Yes,
down?
actually, if you, on my website, melissabphd.com/join, will take you to AgeWiseU. And in AgeWiseU, there's a checklist of the things that your provider should do, and there's a podcast that goes with it. But it starts with somebody taking a good history and physical, reviewing your medications, because you can be on medications that alter your ability to think also, especially a lot of over-the-counters. So like Benadryl, things like that. So somebody should history and physical, review all of your medications, do a physical exam. They should do blood work, and then they should do some screenings for you, either like a mini mental exam or a MOCA testing, because what the screening tests do is they're just looking to see where your problem area is. Like, are you oriented to time, person, and place? Are you able to recall information right immediately? That's actually registration. Can you count forwards and backwards? That is attention and calculation. Then can you tell me the three things I told you before? That's recall. And then the last part of it is the visual spatial element. So the screening tests, that's more the mini mental but the MOCA test also gets into verbal fluency. So there are different things that we can do to help decide how much of a memory issue you're having. But you also need to understand that even as a graduate student, I was listening to people being asked the questions, and I was like, I can't, I don't even know what is today. Yeah. So it is one of those things that if you do become anxious, it's going to impact your testing, and that can happen at any age, so just being able to have those done a couple of times over time, but definitely a CT of your brain, because that can tell us if it's vascular versus Alzheimer's, or if there's something else structural going on in the brain. So that's what I mean by it's, with your blood work, we're looking to make sure you don't have an infection, that there's not something wrong with your thyroid. So all of those tests have to be done, but there's a checklist in HYSU with the podcast episode. And the first course I'm going to be doing, I'll hopefully get it out next month. It's called Dementia 101, because most people think the first thing they're going to see with a memory problem, or with Alzheimer's disease or any dementia, is a memory problem. Because when you look at the 10 warning signs, memory loss that impacts your daily life is always the first warning sign. But that is probably something you're not going to see till later, and it might not be part of what you see first, like particularly with frontal lobe dementia, which is the one that Bruce Willis has. It started more with word finding. And so when they first were talking about his diagnosis, they were just saying he had aphasia. And I was like, well, I wonder if it's expressive or receptive. And so, with his diagnosis, I wondered if it was expressive or receptive, because it can be both. It could be either way. And what that means is, are you having trouble receiving language and understanding it, or are you having trouble articulating what you're trying to say? So it's either expressive or receptive. And then later they're like, oh, it's actually frontal lobe dementia. So in that type of dementia, it doesn't start with changes in memory. In fact, that doesn't come till much later. So it's important to know that. So there's also a 10 warning signs document in HYSU. And if you're an insider or MVP, you can access these checklists. But the warning signs, there's a checklist, and then I did a guide, because sometimes you can read a warning sign like, trouble with visual spatial trouble. I'm like, okay, does a common person, this is a person without doing what I do for a living, do they even understand what that means? So what I did is I added 10 different behaviors that are examples of what you might see for each of the warning signs. And then there's a little box at the bottom where you can write notes so that you can take those to a provider if you're worried that somebody is experiencing trouble with their memory.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Again, I'll put it in the show notes. This is so helpful. And you make aging feel less scary. Can I just say that? It makes me feel, not only for my own personal life, but for my family and my parents. And, I don't think any of us want to think about our parents not being here, or some of us have lost our parents. And that's, just bringing it back to, being in that moment and being with your family, and you really make it seem really attainable to be able to be a caretaker that can do it. Because I feel like sometimes you could feel like, I don't even know if I have the ability to take this on, or if I'm able to give them the type of care that they need. But the fact that you have these courses and a program, it really makes it to a way where you're like, wait, I want to take care of my family. Because I can, and I have the tools, thanks to Dr. Melissa Batchelor. So thank you for that.
Well, and the other piece of it is, it's one of those things like, okay, this is another cute example of how my earlier life reflects this part. I always admired people that could stay home, be like stay-at-home moms, right? And I was like, well, I'm a good mom. Like I could take care of these kids, and I could be a stay-at-home mom. But I had been working and doing things. But so I was in between finishing my dissertation and like starting my first job as an academic. And I had a whole month where I really didn't have anything to do. And I was like, I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. This was the first week of June in the year 2011. On day 2 that those children were home with me by themselves, I was like, they wanted to go to the Jungle Rapids and they wanted to go bowling. And I'm like, we can't do all of that. Like, we've got stuff to do. By the 3rd day, I was like, I need to get them in camp. This is not going to work. Like, I am not meant to be a stay-at-home mom. They're not meant to, we're all going to be miserable.
Mhm.
So I got them in camp. And the next Monday, when we all came home, we were all giving high fives in the kitchen. I was like, yeah. So my point about all of that is, as a caregiver, you don't have to feel like you need to do it all. There is adult daycare
Mm.
that, that your loved one might qualify for. That's usually further down the road, but you just need to adapt the amount of care and support you providing based on what that person can still do for themselves, and to realize, like, it's going to be good for a while, and then there's going to be something that happens and you're going to have to adjust. So if you're in a good place, enjoy that good place, because it's probably going to change. And you just have to be able to adapt to the change, and know and look for the resources that are available in your community to help you, and to talk to people and realize you're not alone. You don't have to
Yes.
do it all by yourself, but it's just like, if you're not good at something, that's fine. Let's try to find somebody who is good at that can help you.
I
But
love that.
with taking care of parents or children, a lot of times we put all that burden on ourselves, and we're like, well, I should be able to do this. I should be able to figure it out. Well, you should, but it's called talking to other people and finding that help.
Oh, I love that. That takes the shame and guilt out of it. And also, yeah, the pressure, like you were saying. I love that because it sounds, yeah, I'm gung ho. But like you said, something's going to happen. You're going to be like, what the heck? What do I
Yeah.
do now? And I'm locked in. I can't do this. I feel like I need to do this, but I feel like I can't. I love this so much. This is very, very human. And yeah, that makes people feel less alone for sure. Okay. So speaking of, how do you build a care team and what does that entail? Like, how do you even, you talk to people like you were mentioning, but what does a care team look like? If somebody had like a full care team, I guess it depended on the person.
So
What do you suggest?
yeah, it depends on who it is. Sometimes you need a small team. Sometimes you're going to have a bigger team. And then sometimes it's going to be time to pass off the team. But basically, um, there is a checklist for building the care team. And at the very top of it, it has different areas to think about between activities of daily living and what are called instrumental activities of daily living. Instrumental activity days of daily living are the things that you see changes in first, so your IADLs. So it's money management, grocery shopping, meal preparation. It's kind of like all the things you learn to do as like a teenager into kind of early adulthood. Your activities of daily living are things like bathing, grooming, dressing. They're all the things that you learn to do when you're a really little kid. So, but when you look at all of those things, then it helps you to know, where do I need help? If your loved one doesn't need help with taking a shower and taking a bath, well, then you don't need home health. If it's just money management, maybe it's one of the siblings or somebody in your family that can help. Make sure it's somebody that you trust, because there's a lot of elder abuse and fraud and financial exploitation that happens. In fact, the scams in this country with older adults are the greatest fleecing of America. Like, billions of dollars are being lost every year to scam. So make sure whoever's helping them financially is somebody that you can trust and that they're held accountable. Maybe even have like 2 people that are double checking each other. But you build your care team based on what support that person needs. Maybe they just can't do their housework by themselves all the time. It's like right now I'm looking at my parents with my other grandmother. She can't clean her whole house, so my aunt goes over and helps her to do that. She can drive herself to the beauty shop, but she can't drive herself necessarily to, like, because I live in rural North Carolina. She can't necessarily drive herself to, like, the city, but they all can pile in somebody's car, or somebody can drive her car. So it's really building your care team out for what that person needs. They need help getting to the doctor. And if you live farther away, there are places, like, you might have to go and see what type of help that person needs. But I just had there's a program that's just expanded here to Wilmington. It's called Care Yaya. There's a lot of companies popping up to help. Care Yaya is actually where they take college students and they help older adults do whatever it is that they need to do. So whereas used to you could post a job at the university to help an older adult, now there's like a company that will help match people. So there's resources like that. So if the person just needs help getting their groceries done, or maybe if they can't prepare their meal and maybe you don't live close by, Meals on Wheels might be an option. So talking to your area agency on aging. So if we're here in, you can find yours the eldercarelocator.gov. But here in Wilmington, it's the New Hanover County Senior Center. That's our area agency on aging. So, but they're full of resources. They can help connect you to things like this. And then I always am trying to cover different topics like this on my podcast to help people connect to resources and to just kind of explain the landscape of things.
Yeah, this seems so much more attainable. Like instead of seeing, oh my gosh, I got to get all this help now. You're right. Like break it down. What actually needs to be focused on right now? What is the most immediate need? I love that. Okay, conversations. What conversations should couples have together about caring for a family member? I mean, whether it's a young child or an aging parent, what are some important conversations that couples can have that basically will help maintain their relationship and not build resentment at the end of the day?
Yeah. So you're talking about a couple who's either caring for kids or a couple who's caring for like their parents.
Yes.
There's a lot of conversations would need to be had because you have to kind of know the norms of that family, right? So this is where family dynamics get really interesting because how and who else is involved? For example, like I've helped my mom navigate this with her mom. And so it's like, if you're not the child of the older adult that you're caring for, you're already not like you're already a little bit of an outsider, even if you've been like part of the family like forever, versus a child with siblings. Like they are like going to be the core group that has to make decisions. So like I remember the other day my cousin came up to me and she goes, they're talking about putting so-and-so taking her home instead of putting her in a nursing home. And I was like, yeah, but you're the wife and your husband is the kid, and that all those kids are making this decision. So yes, while you don't agree with it, you probably are just going to have to accept whatever they're doing. You can say your piece, but at the end of the day, you don't have any decision-making power. So you might as well just let that go.
Yeah.
Do what they want to do.
Yeah.
I was like, that's all that you can do. So I think constantly talking about like what is normal, and you might know some normal things, but just kind of saying, it seems like Sally Sue is like always in charge of things. They're the oldest or they're the baby. They never deal with anything. I think that those are the types of things that are going to be important conversations to have over time. And to kind of know how people, you might not know this up ahead of time, but again, I think it's just appreciating the moment, like when you're in that moment, because what I'm thinking about now is like death and dying. That really just brings out the best in people. And I'm being very sarcastic if you cannot tell. It will either bring out the Jerry Springer dynamics of the entire family, or everybody's just like on board and they're cool and it's calm and peaceful. And you just never know which way it's going to go. But as a couple, just like you have to talk through, like, how are we going to handle this situation? It might be that you find yourself in a situation that you haven't been in before, and you just need to talk it through to say, okay, that didn't go so well. What options do we have to kind of prevent that the next time? And just being kind of clear with your own boundaries, especially if you're not in a position of decision making. But if you are the decision making couple, to realize that you want to, listen to the opinions of other people, but then at the end of the day, just say, well, this is the decision. This is what we're going to do. And
Yeah.
then you have to be prepared for the backlash and whatever else happens. But
Yeah. I appreciate you mentioning the boundaries too. I feel like that's something that we always need to keep into check for mental clarity. Because like you said, personalities arise in various ways. But this goes into one of my last questions is in episode 121, you discussed grief and loss during the holidays. And I was wondering what were some highlights from that episode that you can share with us? Because I know a lot of partners not only may they go through grief during the holidays, but they're also grieving a absence of their fishermen through important family events, holidays, birthdays, things like that. I don't know if that would be similar or different, but I would love to know if there were any highlights that you could share from that episode that might be helpful.
well, I think grief and loss is, you can experience grief and loss in different ways. The way you just framed it is kind of, you're grieving the fact the person isn't present, but they're still alive. So they're just kind of missing out those opportunities. We all experience that. Like, it's like, I wish so-and-so was here today to do the same, but they had to work, So that could be little or big. If you're experiencing a loved one who's experiencing cognitive changes, there is a type of grief that you might not be aware of, and it's called anticipatory grief. That's where you're watching this person change and you're experiencing losing them, but it's like over and over and over. And so you're anticipating kind of like when they pass away, maybe a little bit like what you described with your grandmother, to be like, one day she's not going to be here. So you're like always anticipating this loss that's going to happen, or they're going to decline to the point where I can't take care of them. So just learning more about what anticipatory grief and loss looks like compared to like once they do die, then you kind of enter into this period of time called bereavement. So I think that watching that episode, as well as what's the difference in hospice and palliative care, because there are services to help support you through that entire, like through all of that, and just to be aware of what these things are. And the thing with the holidays, it's not just holidays, it's birthdays, it's anniversaries, it's like any special, 4th of July, like those things can be triggers. And I just watched something on Instagram the other day, and I can't remember who it was. Might have been like Tyler Perry talking to Oprah, but there was this lady in the audience who got ready to talk about her mom that had passed away, and she got upset and she like apologized. And Tyler Perry's like, grief, it just comes. Like it's got its own timetable. But to just accept that that's part of it, because he was like, I tried to work through it, and I tried to drink through it, and I tried to do all these things. And as soon as I would finish whatever it was I was doing, grief was always there waiting. So I think sometimes just acknowledging it and sitting with it for a minute and then saying, okay, I've felt that emotion. Now I'm going to have to move forward and do this. To just realize you're human, and that's also where your care team and some of the different community resources, but just knowing that that's normal can be helpful too. It's like my mom always told me, she's like, too much about stuff, especially when I was having my kids. She goes, because I would be like, this is happening. She goes, oh my gosh, because if I had known all that, like when I was having a kid, like I'd have been losing my mind. And I'm like, well, I like it because I know what's happening. And so you experience it on a different level. So sometimes just educating yourself about grief and loss and kind of what the journey with Alzheimer's is going to look like, but also realizing that, we all have people that come and go in our lives. And, I think being a partner with a fisherman, or if your loved one, is away for 6 months, it's almost like same thing happened with Army wives. So I think there are other pockets of communities where it's the same thing for the film business. Like the husband used to be gone like 3-4 months, and then he'd come back. And that can be disruptive, but just trying to figure out within your family and within your life how to manage those ebbs and flows. And, one good thing about life is things aren't going to stay the same. They're going to change. So if it's not so great right now, Don't worry, it's going to change. And if it's great, enjoy every minute of it because it's going to change. Yeah. And my best friend, I used to say this when I worked at Duke, the guy I was married to then, he would get so mad because we would just be having a good time. He's like, and I'm like, why are you so upset? He's like, well, you guys act like, so being so silly. I'm like, yeah, we are, because right now, this is a great time in our life. And who knows what 6 months from now things are going to look like. And then I ended up moving and, and we've never lived in the same place again. So I was like, yeah, I'm really glad I made the most of that time. So now I have to, wait till certain periods of time in the year that we can get together. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like when things are great, enjoy them. They're not so great, just hold on, tie a knot in that rope. And eventually it's going to change and you'll be all right again.
I love this so much. Okay, this has been just nuggets of value, wisdom, this whole podcast. And I'm just going to finish it up with this question. It's like 2 in 1, but how do you recommend caretakers to take care of themselves? And I'd also, if you're willing to share, love to know how you take care of yourself.
Yeah, so there's actually it's funny, almost every episode that you've mentioned, there's like a checklist. There is one around recognizing signs of caregiver stress. There's a thing called caregiver stress, caregiver burnout. So recognizing what those are, and if you're experiencing those, to realize you're probably not asking enough people to help you. And I know for a lot of people that's hard to do, but we need to get over ourselves because you can't take care of other people unless you can take care of yourself. Because you can't be the one trying to hold everybody up and then you're the one that crumbles, and there are a lot of people, especially spouses, older adult spouses, where the one person will have, Alzheimer's, and the caregiver ends up dying first because of all the stress, because that caregiver is always worried. They're worried about the future. They're worried about, everything. And that person with Alzheimer's is just living in the present moment. They're like, yeah, don't remember what happened 5 minutes ago, not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. So you have to be really careful taking care of yourself. So how do I take care of myself? I think it's making sure that I'm getting my walk in every day. I've really been focused on my diet and learning more about the gut microbiome lately, because what we eat actually impacts so many things. And obviously I study meal times for a living. Getting enough sleep is really important. And I think that I always thought I got plenty of sleep because I was like, if I go to bed at 10, I get up at 6, that's 8 hours. Actually not. Like I got this little aura ring. I'm always only in bed for 8 hours. Might not have gotten that much sleep. So I'm monitoring the quality of my sleep, how much sleep I'm getting, making sure I get my exercise, and having fun. So I just moved back to Wilmington about a year and a half ago. And as a single person, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to focus this next year or two just on building up my girlfriends again. That I have different girl, you can't have one friend because one friend doesn't like to do everything you like to do. So I have my friend that likes to go to Christian concerts with me. And then I have my other friends that like to go, to run the streets and play pool and ping pong, so all these different friends. And then that way, at least somebody's always available whenever I want to go out to go do something. And then spending time with family has been important. So I think monitoring our spiritual health, making sure our social connections are there. And this is actually all part of an age-friendly world. As these are the things that help with longevity and help us to live longer, because we're all social creatures. So we need to help other people, ask other people for help, make sure that we have a sense of purpose each day. So I would say something good is going to happen to me and through me today. And to have that type of positive attitude, even if it's stinky, look for because not every day, all of it is stinky. So at the end of the day, reflect upon whatever was good. Because I tell my 17-year-old this all the time. I'm like, okay, whatever you focus on is going to get bigger. So if you choose to focus on that one little negative thing when there's all this other stuff that's positive, then that little tiny thing is going to get bigger. So I think if your loved one is away, to focus on, maybe writing them letters, or what is something that you could do to like maintain a connection with them. Maybe that's not as traditional, but I mean, I think writing letters, I think those are kind of cool to do too. And finding things that give you pleasure or make you happy. So I think those are just some of the things. I do love a good massage every now and then, and a good facial. And enjoy simple things too. Like, it doesn't have to be like big stuff. It could be putting on your favorite music and having a cup of tea, just taking a quiet moment of quiet to yourself, telling the children, do not come in here.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need 10 minutes. So, but telling people, I'm going to my room for 10 minutes. Do not disturb me. Whether it's lay down, take a nap, meditate, whatever it is that you need to do. So
I love that. Healthy boundaries. It's so important. And thank you so much for your time. You can connect with Dr. Melissa Batchelor on her website, melissabphd.com. And you can listen to her podcast, This is Getting Old, Moving Towards an Age-Friendly World. It's available on Apple, Spotify, and probably many other places as well, right? And I'll link her IG, her Instagram, and Facebook in the show notes as well. Is there anything that I didn't hit on? Is there anything you'd like to end on that we didn't touch on?
Yeah, I appreciate being able to be with you today and to talk to your community. And just let me know if you need anything else.
Thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much, Melissa. You've been the good thing that came to me and through me today. So, and I hope that my community, I'm sure many of us feel that way as well. So thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for listening. To support our community, I'd so appreciate it if you'd tap the subscribe button to this podcast or write a review. And if you're a POCF who wants to connect further, go to POCFpride.com for weekly blogs and to learn about opportunities to join our private communities. We'd love to have you.